I'm a bad motherfucker.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the live stream. We have a special guest with us. It's Whitney Webb. She's been a professional writer, researcher, and journalist since 2016. Really? Just 2016? You've done all that already? From 2017 to 2020, she was a staff writer and senior investigative reporter for the Min Press News. She is a contributing editor for Unlimited Hangout and author of the book One Nation Under Blackmail, about the connection between the U.S. intelligence services, organized crime, and Jeffrey Epstein. Please welcome back to the show, Whitney Webb. Hi, Whitney.
Hey, Jimmy. How's it going?
It's going good. And I know I asked you this before, but you have never considered calling yourself Whitey.
No,
Okay.
but sometimes where I live in South America, people sometimes drop letters from my name by accident, I assume. And so I may have been called that a few times. And also Winnie.
Oh, no
Winnie
kidding.
It's also unflattering. So it's all right.
Winnie.
Comes with the territory, I guess, of having being named after a popular 80s singer.
Yeah, well,
Thanks,
you're
Mom and
you're
Dad.
Whitey Houston.
Yeah.
Winnie is
Yeah.
from that show. What was that ABC show? Remember the
yeah.
voiceover all the time? I can't remember the name of that show. But anyway, I used to like that show, actually. But anyway, it's probably before your time, Whitney.
Savage was on
Probably.
Yeah, what's his name? Savage?
it. Yeah.
What's his first
it?
name?
Fred
Fred Savage.
Savage.
Yeah, he was on. What was that big show he was on?
I'll remember.
The
Doesn't-
Wonder Years?
The Wonder
Yes,
Years.
Look at you, girl.
Maybe not too much before my time. I
Yeah,
don't know.
okay.
I don't really remember it beyond like a few names.
He had a big crush on
yeah.
Winnie. That was his crush. But anyway, you wrote this article. I want to get to it real fast over at Unlimited Hangout. It says debt from above, the carbon credit coup, and sweeping across the shores of Latin America. That's my favorite part of America, Latin America. Comes a scheme. Nobody speaks Latin though. Comes from a scheme from some of the most predatory figures in the venture capital ecosystem of the United States. It's a brazen attempt to assert foreign influence across Latin America and threatens to reshape the very fabric of the region and the day-to-day lives of its people. I remember when who was George Herbert Walker Bush's vice president? Dan Quayle said he was glad he paid attention in Latin class so he could speak to the people in Latin America. And and when he went to the Arctic, he was hoping he could speak articulately. Anyway, that's a Rich Seisler joke. And its core is a serpentine set of contractual obligations held at the municipal level, cast throughout Central and South America, upheld by an intelligence league satellite company, and controlled by a private sector consortium of greenwashed financiers aiming to turn the region's forests into equity and carbon credits. What the
it's a very
what is going on in Latin America? And this is another under the umbrella of climate change, fighting climate change. Is that what this is?
Yeah, so that's part of it. It's really a very complex effort that brings together a bunch of different players under the umbrella. It's this umbrella program that they refer to as Green Plus. It's nominally about imposing carbon markets under the guise of decarbonizing at the municipal or rather local level throughout Latin America. So instead of negotiating with national governments, they're going directly to municipalities, which in Latin America, it's very, very easy to influence them relative to even like national level politicians. So essentially what's happening is that the goal of this is to have all of these localities in Latin America essentially monetize their protected areas by turning it into carbon credits that will be managed by this group of organizations and companies, not the municipalities themselves, and they'll be allowed to receive some money that these carbon credits generate. But they're not the ones actually managing it, the local governments that are signing on and lending their protected areas to the production of these carbon credits. And basically part of the the plan here is to have all of these protected areas, or essentially, you know, really these entire municipalities, if you look at what some of the people in the press releases say, by the satellite firm, which is chaired by Steve Mnuchin, Trump's Treasury Secretary, who's now deeply involved in Israeli intelligence front companies like Cybereason. Trump's Joint Chief of Staff, Joe Dunford, also on the board. Argentina's richest man, Marcos Galperin, who runs Mercado Libre, which is deeply, deeply tied up with PayPal and the so-called PayPal mafia, which includes people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and all of these guys, which are also making big plays in Argentina right now under Javier Milei. And essentially,
I saw, by the way,
satellite company. Oh, sorry.
I did see Elon Musk tweet out that the place to invest is Argentina. Right now, he's all into. So he's in bed with Milei, the new president there, right?
They're quite cozy. Yes. Well, part of that is because Elon Musk is very desperate for lithium for Tesla-related reasons, and Argentina sits on the lithium triangle with Bolivia and Chile. And so Milei has essentially given a large amount of lithium already to Israel or an Israeli company, and presumably Musk is seeking some of that lithium as well, and he's also attempted to do that in Chile.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were saying?
No, it's fine. But anyway, aside from those people on the board of the satellite company, the people that created that company are Argentinians, but they're former contractors to U.S. intelligence, to the NSA, to DARPA, the Pentagon, and they're directly partnered with Peter Thiel's Palantir, a contractor for the CIA. And that was created with InQtel money, and also Elon Musk's SpaceX, which is tied up with Space Force, an intelligence and military agency, which Peter Thiel is also tied up with. So under the guise of saving the planet, this intelligence, essentially like front company, the satellite firm with all these like predatory Trump guys on the board, like Steve Mnuchin, who should have been prosecuted for like the 2008 financial crisis, but wasn't by Kamala, is on the board of this, and they're like allowed to spy on these areas in Latin America under the guise of protecting it.
So that's
one component of this program. There's several others that are also very bad, which is why it's such a big piece.
So,
to say really quickly, I co-authored this article with Mark Goodwin, who's editor-in-chief of Bitcoin Magazine, and so this was co-published by Unlimited Hangout and Bitcoin
I used to love that. He used to make some of my favorite game shows in the 90s, Mark Goodman and Bill Todson Productions.
I think this is a different
different Mark Goodman? I used to love categories. Anyway, you say here, one of its key ambitions appears to be further entrenching the debt load of the region through the multilateral development banks and the dollarization of the continent from the subnational level up through carbon markets upheld by a digital ledger. So this is like akin to IMF fuckery, right? So
so Larry Fink and Mark Carney and a lot of these ESG bankers and billionaires have said that the only way to quote unquote stop climate change is to reimagine the World Bank and the IMF. I
was right.
So the way they're reimagining that right now, so, the IMF and the World Bank for a long time have been rightly criticized for basically using debt slavery in the global South to have them privatize off all their state assets and give it to foreign corporations.
Let me just explain to people how they do that. So what the IMF will do is they'll come into a poor country, and they'll say, hey, we're going to give you all this money, and you could, do whatever you want with it. And then, of course, they know they'll never be able to pay it back. And so when they don't pay it back, they go, hey, you got to sell us your public land, your public space, your public works. You got to privatize all that and give it to Western corporations. And so that's their way of that's their version of their neoliberal takeover of smaller countries. Is that a good explanation of what they do?
I think it's fair. There's a lot of different ways to, in different case studies to look at, right? But places like Argentina are a really good example. That's a really good example of a country that's been totally wrecked by the multilateral development banking system, which, by the way, the IMF, the World Bank, intimately tied with U.S. empire. The U.S. military even admitted in documents that were published by WikiLeaks that they're financial weapons of the U.S. military, the IMF and the World Bank. Yeah.
So
now what they're doing instead by reimagining them is that they're taking U.S. empire out of it and they're having it basically be a direct weapon of the bankers. So instead of the bankers like buying up U.S. politicians and influencing U.S. empire and getting what they want that way, they're reimagining it to basically create this new economic system that we've seen bits of over the past few years. The idea of programmable, surveillable money, and also this idea of a voluntary carbon market. The goal of which is to have it be voluntary in name only, not unlike digital ID and all of that stuff. So if you want to know more about this, you can look at the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero that was created by Mark Carney and Mike Bloomberg, which somehow the UN decided were the best people for the job of saving the planet. They're in charge of climate finance for the United Nations. The stop and frisk New York mayor billionaire from Salomon Brothers, Mike Bloomberg, and the former head of the Bank of England and Bank of Canada and former Goldman Sachs guy, Mark Carney. That's who's saving the planet for the UN. They're the ones reimagining this, the whole multilateral development banking system. And part of this involves this carbon market play where the World Bank, along with Google and some other actors, are developing climate wallets for people.
Tell me about a climate wallet.
Well, they're designing it. It's designed to run on, I believe, the Chia network, which is the guy that invented BitTorrent, his new project. And they claim to be sort of like a net zero blockchain, I guess. And basically the idea of it is for people to participate in the carbon market to come. And the idea of people being able to sort of like monetize nature. And there's a whole lot of stuff going on with carbon credits and carbon markets right now. And it's a very murky legal area. And I'm very concerned about it because there's this whole mentioned but relatively unexplored issue of so-called carbon rights, where the person that buys the carbon credit can get rights to the carbon in the forest the credit represents. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So like, I buy a carbon credit in this forest, this Colombian rainforest, and now I am potentially the owner of the carbon in those trees, so I can decide what happens to that carbon. And the people that actually like own the land, or like Colombians, they don't necessarily own it anymore, potentially. This is like this murky gray area, so it's opening the way up, I think, to some land grabs in the global south. So a lot of very disturbing things happening in carbon market land, and even under the idea of reducing CO2 levels and all of that. The carbon market, as it's been functioning, just hasn't done that. It's been criticized by people on the left and the right. And then there's been time and time again, it's been revealed by even mainstream media that up to 90% of all carbon credits on the market right now are completely worthless and meaningless. So it's basically like the junk bond scandal of the 1980s again. And what's interesting is that the person that invented carbon markets and carbon credit trading is a guy named Richard Sander, who worked at Drexel Burnham Lambert, the junk bond scandal bank of the 1980s. He was a senior vice president until he was brought in by the George Bush Sr. administration to apply free markets to environmental issues for Bush Sr.'s EPA, and then was contacted by this like Rockefeller oligarch guy who was at the UN named Maurice Strong to develop the same solution for carbon. And he's also the father of derivatives of financial futures, which of course helped explode in 2008. So the guy that invented all of that is the guy that invented carbon credit trading, and he also wants to make a market just like that for free water and free air, so you can, get basically taxed on that too.
So we covered a similar story to this. They tried to create something like this on Wall Street, and somehow it failed, or they couldn't get the approval. I can't remember the story exactly, but here you. First of all, what you're describing sounds like, if you're going to make a cartoon of evil financial things, and you they always put it behind. They always couple it with we're saving the planet. We're helping people
with altruism.
With altruism,
yes. They claim to be altruistic. I mean, even Sam Bankman-Fried did that of FTX, right? He was the face of effective altruism.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, he was was going to give all his money to charity and everything. He just drove a regular car. He didn't care about things. He wanted to help people. What a great
guy! Oh wait, it turns out it's other people's money, and not his money.
Well, here you write, you say, astonishingly, every capital city of Latin America has eagerly signed on, apparently unaware of the strings attached to these seemingly benign partnerships, while a majority of municipalities in the region have also made commitments with these same groups that will push them to join Green Plus, potentially in a matter of weeks. The hopefully well-meaning regional governments have unwittingly paved the way for a sweeping surveillance apparatus tied to American intelligence that threatens to erode privacy and civil liberties under the guise of progress and combating the climate crisis. Well, hooray for Western imperialism once again. They've figured out how to screw over everybody while enriching a handful of people and making everything worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty fair to say. And I think a lot of this we're going to be seeing going forward, this push to have economically destabilized countries in Latin America turn towards dollar-denominated stable coins. Like that's happening in Argentina, for example, because of like the issues with the peso there and how it's been devalued so much, even under Milei. People are flocking to dollars essentially, but like stable coins, either like Tether USDT or Circles USDC. And this whole crypto ecosystem in Argentina is pretty much, largely managed by this one particular network that's intimately tied to the satellite company I was talking about. They're all tied up with this group called Endeavor, which Endeavor has an Argentina branch. They have branches really all over the world. They're based in the United States. Their board is chaired by Edgar Bronfman Jr. of the Bronfman family, which, if you're familiar with my books, is intimately tied to organized crime and basically the people behind Justin Trudeau. And another person on their board is Reid Hoffman, who's the co-founder of LinkedIn, who was a member, part of the so-called PayPal mafia. And probably the closest person in Silicon Valley to Jeffrey Epstein. So
the whole it seems like the whole Western world is run just by straight up criminals and con men.
Yeah,
I mean, from Justin Trudeau to obviously Joe Biden, but there's and that people think that. Now, do these group of people, are they also opposed to Donald Trump? Because I know the establishment donor class in the United States is opposed to Donald Trump because he won't do exactly everything they want him to do. He does most of it. So would you surmise that these people also don't want Donald Trump, or how would you look at it?
Well, Reid Hoffman is a big funder of sort of Democrat causes and the Democrats, but other members of the quote unquote PayPal mafia are very much supportive of Trump. For example, Peter Thiel was a big force on Trump's transition team, people that worked very closely for Thiel and Thiel's Palantir, basically directed all the early policy decisions and appointments of Trump's Department of Defense. And there's been a lot of connections, I think, still between PayPal mafia and Trump. And you have someone like Elon Musk also sort of posturing publicly anyway as a libertarian and sort of in that right populist camp. So I think this particular network has people who sort of play to both sides of the political machine, which is frankly, if you want to get lots of lucrative government contracts, I mean, that's what you do, Yeah.
Oh, definitely. So, so where do you see all this ending up in 5 or 10 years? Where do you, are you good at that? Can you make a prediction?
I mean, I can try, because frankly, it's hard to know where we will be, but I think it's pretty clear that there's certain efforts to push people in a particular direction. So I think it's been clear for a long time, and as I'm sure you're aware, there's a push to onboard everyone to a digital ID system. Vaccine passports during COVID were a big part of this. But there's been all sorts of pushes for it. For example, WorldCoin, Sam Altman, scan your eyeball, get a unique digital ID in a wallet you can have tokens in. People in the global south that they're basically being bribed to give up their biometric data for the guy that runs OpenAI with Microsoft and stuff. There's these digital ID initiatives are consistently tested on vulnerable stateless people, but the goal is to have it rolled out globally and to have it be interfaced with a digital wallet where the money is programmable and surveillable. So a lot of people have been talking about CBDCs, central bank issued digital currency. But there's also going to be digital currencies just as surveillable and programmable that are issued by the private sector and the Wall Street banks. And that isn't being talked about enough.
Right.
So one of the stable coins I mentioned earlier that people in Argentina are being rapidly onboarded to because their currency is being destroyed, Tether recently onboarded the FBI and Secret Service to its platform.
Jesus.
So everyone that uses Tether gets to use their money under the watchful eye of American intelligence, essentially. And those same actors, the FBI and the Secret Service, are part of this public-private partnership housed within the World Economic Forum. It's basically U.S., Israeli, and UK intelligence, plus a lot of big banks and PayPal. Their ambition is to end online anonymity, and with that, also financial anonymity. So we're seeing unprecedented crackdowns on, financial privacy tools, both for cryptocurrency and for regular transactions, and big pushes from all across the internet, really, to have you tie your government-issued ID to what you do online, whether it's your social media account or really anything. And so the goal here is to have, create a completely surveillable system based on biometrics and with money that the government or whoever can directly program and surveil. So programming it means that you can only use the money for what they say you can use it for, and you can only send it to who they say you can send it to.
So,
in all of that.
If people, are having a hard time wrapping their heads around this, so what this is they're just going to make it easier to do to everybody what they did to the trucker protest in Canada. And
yeah, I think a lot of that was, trials to see how much pushback they'll actually get for this kind of stuff. I mean, the goal is to onboard the whole world onto that. And they consistently test this stuff first in a global south. So on the global south. So what this article is about is a big effort to essentially wrap up a significant amount of Latin America by focusing at the subnational level, the local level, onto these kinds of systems under the guise of we must decarbonize now.
Yeah.
But really if you look at sort of the fine print, I guess you could say, of this program, the decarbonization funds go toward a specific company that's tied up with this particular group that's trying to build an intercontinental power smart grid from the Americas, and they've been testing their smart grid in poor communities in Latin America, in Los Angeles, actually, in the U.S., and also in Colombia and some other countries, with the idea of having it all tied together and having energy be currency. And the idea is to move away from currency as we know it now, and have all these commodity-backed currencies, and that people trade energy or trade carbon credits. And basically, it's complicated. There's a lot of different reasons for why they're moving in that direction. Part of it is because of the insane amount of debt that the world is saddled with. You have to park that debt in certain places. You have to find ways to manage it, right? And so, some of these stable coins are being used for that. Carbon credits are being used for that. Actually, RFK's vice president, Nicole Shanahan, was running or managing a project at Stanford Law that was about using carbon credits to facilitate quantitative easing, which is, the endless money printing by the Federal Reserve. So there's been a lot of, efforts to look at what they're going to do with the debt, and essentially they have to remake the financial system, but they're, making it in a way where it's, completely surveillable and controllable. And these are really the ambitions that the U.S. national security state had right after 9/11 and tried to impose on everybody. Total information awareness, for example, was a program that they tried to enact. There was a big uproar about it at the time in like 2003, 2004, because even the New York Times and stuff knew that it was going to completely eliminate privacy for the average American. And so the ambition of this program was to surveil literally everything, including people's like health signals, to prevent pandemics before they can happen. To prevent financial crime before it can happen, to prevent terrorist attacks before it can happen. It's pre-crime. And total information awareness was recreated as a private company in 2004, right after Congress defunded it. And it's provably Palantir, which is Peter Thiel's company that contracts to every single U.S. intelligence agency. They privatized it because they realized if they can frame it as a private company, people won't complain. People will give their data freely to the private company. So Peter Thiel doesn't just make Palantir, he also makes Facebook. And they build this network of companies. And now Palantir, for years, has been testing predictive policing in urban communities in the United States, really testing it all over the world now. And I'm kind of concerned they're going to make a very big comeback with Trump, because some of the main people in developing those policies for Palantir, when Trump was in office last time, they were very intimately tied up and served in the Trump administration. People like Trey Stevens, for example. And Trey Stevens created a company with the Oculus Rift guy, the VR headset guy, Palmer Luckey, that used to work, that got, thanks to Peter Thiel, sold his company to Facebook, and then like got more Thiel funding. They're building the smart wall for Democrats and Trump, because Trump doesn't want like an actual physical wall anymore. He's all in on the smart wall. And on a recent campaign stop said, we need a biometric entry exit tracking system for everyone. That's how we're going to stop, illegal migration and all of that. And one of his campaign lawyers is going on podcasts saying we need to use biometric face scanning to vote as voter ID. We need to scan our eyeballs. Woman? Yeah, Alina Habba.
Okay. All right. So I think we have actually a story loaded up to talk about the wall. So let me stop you here. Let me stop you here for a second before we get into that. And let me just ask you. Go ahead.
To summarize, then, really quick. Basically, the goal is pre-crime. And that's why they want to eliminate financial privacy and privacy in general online, and know everything you do.
So this is like when I was in high school, I read the Brave New World and 1984. This is like both of those things.
Sure.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Yeah. I mean, ultimately the goal. So take people like Larry Fink, for example. Larry Fink is on record saying, markets like totalitarian governments.
Correct.
Markets like dictatorships. That is why in the 1980s and the 70s, the CIA imposed military dictatorships on Latin America, because that's what the market liked. Because they, the whole idea of like the Reagan administration, for example, and other administrations too, but like when a lot of these coups were happening and these military dictatorships were being propped up, that's who was in power. They wanted certain economic policies imposed on those populations in Latin America. And they didn't want interference for the CIA to do drug running in Colombia and these other countries. Of course, Bush Sr., when he was CIA director, was very involved in all of that. And so in order to get people who will be amenable to those policy decisions that are in the interest of the CIA, but not their national interests, you have to impose authoritarian governments, right? That's why you had them back people like Manuel Noriega, Pinochet in Chile. I mean, really, the entire continent was pretty much in dictatorship or in a state of brutal war. And I think there's a big goal here to have U.S. empire really clamp down on Latin America for this new, global turf war between the West and BRICS and whatnot. The U.S. doesn't plan to have the dollar die and be dethroned. They plan to bring it back in a very significant way with these dollar-denominated stable coins. and other tools they have at their disposal as well. So to think that like the bankers in Wall Street are just going to like drift off into the night without a fight, these guys had been saddling countries around the world in debt for a very long time. They're remaking policies from either at the UN or at the the World Bank, IMF levels. These institutions have enormous influence, and they have every intention to keep the debt slavery model going. But because of economic realities, they have to reinvent that system, and that's what we're seeing right now.
It's really mind blowing, and people. I know people think voting for Democrats or Republicans is going to change anything. It's so funny to me.
No,
I know.
Unfortunately, it's not.
No. Okay. Over to Steph. We'll be right back.
Okay. All right. Okay. We're just figuring out how many stories we have so far. Okay. You're going to, go ahead and cross. No problem. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in on an early show today with Jimmy Dore. He's going to be flying. We are going to be flying to, beautiful
Edmonton.
Las Vegas, and then Edmonton. That's where we're going to go. Hempkar says Gorbachev was going to end debt slavery, protect the environment, and end the space race. But Repub said F you and invaded Panama against all of the UN that Iraqi and Bush Sr. declared a NWO. All right. Thank you for that, Hempkar.
Come to me.
Back to Jimmy.
So I'm here with Whitney Webb, and we're going to talk about this border wall idea. But listen to this. So these are the things that people tweet out. Look at this large group of illegals storming the border in El Paso, Texas. We were just in El Paso, Texas. This is what an invasion looks like, they say, right? Nearly 24 illegals docked a boat and vanished into Newport Beach, California. Your country's under invasion from every corner. Wake up before it's too late. While you were sleeping and watching war games in Ukraine and Israel, about 3,000 illegals ran into the United States today. So here's your article, Manufacturing Consent, the Border Fiasco, and the Smart Wall. The political response to the crisis at the southern border continues to advance the bipartisan Smart Wall. Having been backed by Trump and Biden alike, this bipartisan consensus reaches far beyond the United States as much as the world is similarly speeding along in implementing digital borders. The disastrous situation in the U.S.-Mexico border has been intentionally produced. We've been saying that at this show for at least a year. Throughout the last several administrations, regardless of campaign and other public rhetoric, the porous nature of the border has remained unresolved. On several occasions, the situation as it has developed has been blamed largely on incompetence and government inefficiency. Though some administrations have been tougher than others in regard to terrestrial migration under some metrics, the U.S.-Mexico border has not been sealed off, so to force entrants to cross through officially recognized and managed ports of entry. Under the current administration, it has been pointedly obvious that even the sections of the border that do contain physical barriers are being dismantled on purpose. All the while, illegal crossings have risen to unprecedented levels. Whatever the motives for this deliberate policy on the part of the Biden administration, the end result has been the widespread characterization of the crisis as an invasion, priming the voter bloc, usually most concerned with border security, the American right, for military-style solutions. So let me bring in Whitney. Whitney, tell me what are these solutions that we're going to actually end up getting?
Well, this is another one of those solutions that was actually what they tried to do after 9/11 under the George W. Bush administration. During that time, it was being run by the newly created DHS. It was called SBI Net. But the idea was to have this basically a surveillance wall, a smart wall, instead of an actual physical barrier, and that this was going to be cheaper and more secure. And of course, the contractors that had it, I think it was Boeing, and another one ended up spending, $1 bazillion and producing nothing. And so the project was kind of quasi-scrapped. And then comes in this company called Anduril, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, or rather the people behind it, Palmer Luckey and Trey Stevens, who are both intimately tied to Peter Thiel, the American billionaire PayPal co-founder, and Palantir co-founder, who's a lot of ties to, American intelligence. These are the people producing the modern smart wall, and have been building a lot of these biometric towers. This has been something that since the early 2000s has also been very heavily supported by the Democratic Party. And Trump is also a big supporter as well, at least as of 2019. So a few years after he was president, he reneged on the idea of what he started to call a medieval border wall, and we should all move to the smart wall. So the smart wall, the idea is to have this biometric entry exit tracking system, not just on the terrestrial borders, but in airports and really every port of entry. And this is something that is happening not just in the US, it's something that's being rolled out in seeming lockstep throughout the entire world, particularly the Western world. The European Union begins it this year. The UK is poised to roll it out next year. And there's a major effort, I would argue right now, to manufacture consent for the same system in the United States. But this is really not something that's even though it's being marketed to U.S. conservatives, this is really a policy agenda that's coming from an institution that conservatives tend not to like, which is the United Nations. It's part of SDG 16, Sustainable Development Goal, which the implementing partner of which is Interpol, which is sort of like the global policing organization. And as part of its role in implementing the UN's Agenda 2030, Interpol created something called the Global Policing Goals. And those involve creating this system globally where every entry and exit into every country is managed by a biometric digital ID system that essentially Interpol controls at the global level. So this is being rolled out in all these different countries that have all signed on to the global policing goals of Interpol, and also, the UN SDG policy agenda. And it's being marketed to the United States right now as the only way to stop, mass migration. But as you read, and I noted in my article, this is something that's been really allowed to happen because the US-Mexico border has been porous for a very long time. There have been migration issues there for a very long time. Even when Trump was in office, the border was never sealed off. No one's ever sealed it off. And you could argue that because Democrats support this same policy agenda, they've created the exact conditions to sort of sell this or have the opposing side of the uniparty sell this to their base. But a lot of times the government frames stuff they intentionally do as incompetence.
Yes.
And this is not a case of incompetence. If they wanted to shut down the border, they could. But also, I think there's been a lot of anxiety generated about the border situation by the media, and not just mainstream media, but also alternative media, by framing it as an invasion and with all this sorts of militaristic language, and basically calling for either the smart wall or some other sort of military style solution, which, is not good. When you give that kind of power to the US government, regardless of what party is in power, let's remember that it's a uniparty at the end of the day.
Yes.
They trample on people's civil liberties.
So
they did it during COVID. They did it after 9/11 and everywhere in between. So to think that giving them military style power to stop mass migration, which they've allowed to happen, is going to change anything is absurd.
So they've invented a problem so they can implement a solution they've wanted to have for a long time. And so that's why we see this. So this makes sense now. I hear you say it comes from the UN. And even though you say it's appealing to the people who are on the right in America because they want to have the border closed down, but it's coming from the UN. And notice that this show that this isn't an American problem, this immigration problem. This is all over the Western world. This is happening in Germany. It's happening in Scotland, France, the UK. So I've been saying that this is intentional. And we've been trying to figure out, there's lots, I think, of different reasons, but certainly one of the reasons is so they can implement this biometrics kind of surveillance, right?
Yeah, and honestly, some of the bigger names in alternative media commentary, and especially in right-leaning independent media, have been promoting the smart wall as a direct consequence of this heightened anxiety about the border situation. For example, you had Brett Weinstein go on Tucker Carlson saying we need a smart wall. You had Colonel Douglas McGregor saying we need a smart wall. And I'm sure it's more than just them. So,
And so
let's
do you
keep in
think
mind,
that that's
though,
just, do you think that's them just being desperate for a solution and not really knowing the bigger game that's being played?
I mean, that I'm not going to say that I know what's in their brains because I don't. But if you're someone like Brett Weinstein, who made a name for yourself being a big COVID critic, and you can't see that how this directly ties into the digital ID agenda that you're supposedly against, I don't know. Maybe he should rethink that.
Okay, well, I will try to get Brett on, and I will try to ask him about that and use my influence with him, which is, I don't know how much I have with him, but you know, he seems to me like a guy who's not he's not a schemer. He seems that he cares about things, and I think that this border crisis is so overwhelming because it was intended. This is intentionally happened, as you wrote in your article, and people are. I mean, I had Dennis Kucinich on, right? So Dennis Kucinich couldn't be a bigger lefty, and Dennis Kucinich, I said, "What do you think about the border?" And I thought he was going to say, well, you know, these are good people. We need to, immigration's good and blah, blah. And he just goes, we have to seal the border. Like, just like that. He said, we have to seal the border. And so he didn't tell me how he wanted to do it, but I wonder if he's on board with this digital or electronic bullshit. And it's being sold to everybody as the answer to these porous borders that they have intentionally made happen. And it goes all the way back to Gaddafi, right? So one of the things that Gaddafi did was kept the immigration from Africa from going into Europe, and he thought that gave him safety, protection, right? But no, they wanted to get rid of him because they wanted to they wanted all that shit to happen. Isn't this kind of amazing that they're doing? So this, again, this is like the WEF kind of a thing. This is the handful of billionaires that actually run things. You keep mentioning them left and right. And they don't care about countries. It's like that speech from Network in 1973. There are no countries. There's only companies.
A college of corporations.
And the international transfer of dollars. And that's all this is about. And so if they have to wreck your country, your border, your culture, right? If they have to completely flood your culture with people from other cultures, and so you are no longer have a cult, they don't give a shit about that, and that's what's happening all over the Western world right now. And what I try to warn people against is don't blame the immigrants, right? That's the distraction, right? Yeah, the problem is the people implementing this policy. Joe Biden, not only at the border, he's literally putting immigrants on planes and flying them into the United States and turning them loose in America, and then they go to New York City and they get a credit card for $1,000 a month, as we have people living under every bridge in America. So this is the chaos. Always favors the establishment, create chaos, and then you have people beg for authoritarian solutions, which is what you're talking about right here, and that's why you see people like maybe Brett Weinstein and those others asking, because that's what they've done. They've made us desperate. They've made us afraid of chaos. They want us to have some kind of order and safety, and they know exactly what we have the solution for you. Here's your solution. It's ultimate surveillance and control of your currency. Right?
Yeah. So the idea is to sell ultimate safety and security to people, but basically what you're going to get is prison. Because in prison, you have a roof over your head, you have food brought to you. Life is easy, right?
Yes.
It's super convenient. They watch everything you do and whatever, and you don't have freedom of movement. But no one can get you in there. I mean, the idea is to get us to trade as much of our liberty as possible for security, but it's really the illusion of security because we'll have neither, because literal government, our entire government is run by like organized crime.
100%.
So let's, having them have complete control of this insane surveillance apparatus that they want to apply pre-crime to, it's absurd. And the main problem with the smart wall, and what I would encourage people who are promoting it to consider, is that the company building the smart wall is intimately tied to the same company making pre-crime for the CIA and all of these other U.S. intelligence agencies. It's a company called Anduril. It's funded by Peter Thiel. It's was co-founded by Palmer Luckey and Trey Stevens. Trey Stevens was a big figure at the Trump Department of Defense. Former Palantir worked for a U.S. intelligence agency that he refuses to disclose. On the board of Carbine 9/11, which was heavily funded by Jeffrey Epstein and Leslie Wexner. It's Ehud Barak's surveillance company taking over 911 call centers throughout the United States. That is who Trey Stevens is, and he made this company. Palantir was expressly created to become the privatized version of Total Information Awareness, which was a Bush-era program that they put John Poindexter in charge of at DARPA. John Poindexter is one of the most notorious figures in the Iran-Contra scandal, and he was put in charge of this office and then advised Alex Karp and Peter Thiel, along with Richard Pearl, about how to make Palantir when TIA was shut down. The goal of TIA, I mean, the logo of TIA is just completely insane also. If you want to look it up, or any of your viewers want to look it up. But it basically shows that their ambition is to surveil the entire world. And it says something like science is power on the logo. And it has this like one eye beaming over the entire planet and surveilling it all. And the idea is to have it, again, be like pre-crime. And actually, pre-crime was legalized. A lot of people don't know this. Pre-crime was legalized in the United States under Trump. William Barr did it. He created this program called DEEP, which is an acronym. Can't remember what it's an acronym for off the top of my head. But also, under the Trump administration, they tried to make this other agency called HARPA, Health DARPA, and their flagship program, promoted by people like Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, was called Safe Homes, another acronym. But basically, the goal was to use an AI algorithm to comb through American social media posts to look for early warning signs of what they called neuropsychiatric violence. And based on what the AI brought back, either medicate people, send people to court-ordered physicians, order house arrest, or detention. All because of social media posts. That was happening under the Trump administration. The Biden administration isn't any better because the same entities running this and these AI algorithms in Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley funds both sides of our government. They essentially are the government. They've like fundamentally fused with our intelligence agencies and our defense apparatus. The people that chaired the National Security Commission on AI about how the national security state is going to run AI, it was Eric Schmidt of Google, a huge Hillary donor and Biden donor who is paying officials in the Biden administration illegally and running Biden's science and technology policy right now with no consequences. It gets reported on in Politico, and the White House counsel is like, no comment, and nothing happens. These Silicon Valley oligarchs are completely untouchable, and they are building a dystopian hell, and this is their smart wall. Anduril is one of their companies. The guy that created Palantir, Peter Thiel, has funded Anduril extensively. Trey Stevens is a guy that has worked for Peter Thiel for a very long time. Palmer Luckey has documented ties to Peter Thiel. And all these guys are contracting for the military. Anduril is testing out all of these like autonomous drones in Ukraine, have a lot of ties to what's going on in Ukraine right now. All of that stuff, all the AI systems of their drones interface with this smart wall stuff they're building too, So it's like what they could potentially build here is very dystopian and very bad. They're beta testing it in war zones right now. Palantir, by the way, is teamed up with the IDF in their Gaza massacre as well, and their AI death machine. So the people building the American version of the AI death war machine are the same people building the smart wall. Okay, that is very bad. So this is the same exact deep state that people on the right claim to hate. They are now being manipulated to cheer on the deep state smart wall. You want to have a smart wall? Find another company to frickin' build it that's not Spookfest, and tied to the literal worst people in the world. Can we just try that, maybe? If a smart wall is the solution, like any other company.
Not going to happen. Those people have control of the government and the media. And so Well, it's always depressing to talk to you, Whitney. And
Well, I mean, I know a lot of people maybe feel that way, but the thing is, I think there's a lot of hope if we break through this fake altruism these companies claim to have, or we're just here to help. We just care about the planet. We just care about the migration issue and want to make America great again and safe. These are not what these people do. If you look at what they have done their entire careers, they are, either political criminals or financial criminals or both. And we should stop listening to them. And if we stop listening to them and we stop using their stuff, this all stops at the end of the day. And so we are having, for example, in the case of the smart wall, I mean, they want the smart wall because it will force people, if you want to cross the border, to use digital ID. We are being hit across the board, right and left, and everyone in between, with reasons for why we need digital ID. And they are doing that because if people do not use digital ID, it fails. It will all fail. They are trying to manufacture consent because they need our consent. They need our compliance. If we do not consent and we do not comply, it fails. Vaccine passports was the beta test for this. If you did not participate in the vaccine passport and you supported businesses that weren't part of that and rejecting people because they didn't take an experimental vaccine from your business, there were ways to get around that, right? And so too, it will be during digital ID. People need to learn from what happened with vaccine passports. All the digital ID companies and initiatives, ID 2020 and so on, were essentially creating the vaccine passports, and it was all to push people into the same digital ID paradigm. We have to say no to that because it's surveillance hell. If you don't want to be trapped in surveillance hell forever, just don't use it. Find ways to work around it. It may not be as easy or convenient as using it, but maybe slavery is convenient in some sense, or being in prison is convenient in some senses. But I don't want that, and I don't want that for my kids. So it's up to everyone essentially, but people are being asked to comply and consent to the system. And that's precisely because they need that from people. And if people say no, it doesn't happen or it fails. And that's why I think this is really talking about this is important. And at the end of the day, it's a white pill, not a black pill.
Whitney, I'm sorry we don't have more time for you to scare the shit out of us, but everybody check out Whitney Webb. She writes for Unlimited Hangout right there. Her great article, Manufacturing Consent, the Border Fiasco and the Smart Wall. Go ahead and check that out. I really appreciate you coming on and making time for us today. And also Whitney Webb's book, One Nation Under Blackmail. It's about the connection between the U.S. intelligence services, organized crime, and Jeffrey Epstein. And now that Jeffrey Epstein's dead, they don't do that stuff anymore. So that's all done. They don't use.
It's not like after Epstein wound down all his sex blackmail stuff when he was arrested the first time, he went into Silicon Valley and became a tech investor. Silicon Valley is the new blackmailer,
Yeah.
Because they surveil everything and they don't need people like Epstein anymore.
Oh, okay. So, well, I had my computer in my phone was taken over by Pegasus. So after I testified at the UN Security Council, so they've probably planted things on me. They've got everything. They know everything about me, and at the same time, I was invited to become a member of the Bohemian Grove. So that's the carrot and the stick, and so they got me. Anyway, Whitney, I really appreciate it. It's always fascinating to talk to you, and good luck with everything.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure.
All right.
See you soon.
Let's take a break, and we'll be right back with Mike McRae.
Thank you.
Round a rabbi hole, tunnels and all. There's Jews in the walls. Isn't it bliss? The rabbinical grace soiling the mattresses. Well, let me tell you. If I were Rabbi Shmuley and diddle 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 digga digga diddle diddle dum, all day long I'd diddle little bums. If I were a Shmuley man, I'd peddle all my dildos, dreidel dildos, selling dildos with my daughter and her mum. If I were a Jewish Shmuley man, I'd be digging with a dildo in my bum. I'd wear a grotesque nose and go grab some goyim right on the nipple with a pinch. A Shabbos lap dance brace for the youngest mensch.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you hate shitty coffee? I, for one, really hate shitty coffee, which is why I'm excited to introduce to you a company that's revolting against shitty coffee, and it's called the 1775 Coffee Company. Now, I haven't had it yet because I only drink decaf. Steph has had it. Steph, how do you like it?
I really like it. I've been, you know what? I have a French press, and so I've been using my French press and totally enjoying it. It's delicious. It's smooth. It's smooth.
So 1775, the world awakened. In 1775, the world awakened to a new era. And now it's 1775 Coffee Company is bringing you a coffee that embodies that revolutionary spirit. Crafted with passion and precision, our beans are ethically and exclusively sourced from the finest coffee beans farms of Bolivia. Didn't know that. 1775 Coffee Company's farm-to-cup journey ensures the highest quality of authenticity and sustainability from start to finish. With each sip, your palate will recognize and appreciate the dedication and passion that goes into crafting this single-sourced brew. 1775 Coffee Company takes pride in offering customers a truly exceptional coffee experience with their premium coffee collection. But their dedication to this revolution extends beyond the realm of taste. Safeguarding freedom of speech is critical right now, which is why 1775 Coffee Company has joined forces with Rumble in defense of one of our most fundamental rights, freedom of speech. Coffee that's sure to awaken all your senses, including the sense of freedom. So choose 1775 Coffee by going to 1775coffee.com/litter. That's LITTER, and use the code LITTER for 10% off the checkout on your first order. 1775 Coffee, brewed to perfection, crafted with revolution.